I'm not sure if this is going to work or not. So we are going to try. But I wanted to record a little bit of a video to accompany my 2025 reading list because I get a lot of comments about how do I pick books? How do I go from book to book? What prompts my TBR list? How do I read, 53 books in a year, etc. But my suggestion to you is whatever your resolution is to read, just have one. And at the very fundamental, basic number one resolution should be just to read more. And I would say read longer. In this day and age of quick scrolling and skimming and articles, the art of deep fiction and the art of or deep reading in general, not just fiction reading, but nonfiction and in-depth articles versus quick sound bites is a lost art. And I really think that we can bring it back. I think that there's lots of reading going on. I think that book sales are up, but I'm not quite sure if the comfort reading that's happening is in line with the deep reading that maybe needs to happen. It's not to say we shouldn't all have those comfort reads. I mean, my 2025 book list starts with Daisy Jones and the Six, which if that isn't a quick, fun, cool read, I don't know what is. But at the same time, it's being paired with nonfiction from 1957, like Endurance. It's being paired with books on Ayurvedic medicine and yoga, which are things that I'm interested in. It's paired with books on neuroscience, like Your Brain on Art or This Is What It Sounds Like, and also literary fiction, which is my great love. But really, my reading resolution is simple. It was the year 2025. My goal was to read 25 books. If I meet the goal, great. If I exceed the goal, great. If I don't meet the goal, fine. It's not that deep. But the reality is there's something about having a numerical goal for me that's exciting. And when I write it down in my reading journals, I like to write the little number. It gives me a sense of accomplishment. And for many of us, who don't like to break chains or like to have a numbers driven goal, 30 minutes of reading or 25 books or the New York Times top 10 bestsellers, it really helps to have those kinds of frameworks. For a lot of people, though, it's just the lazy, in the best way, delicious wander through the bookstore, and there is this magical book that surfaces, and there it is, and you take it off the shelf and you have a lovely experience. And maybe it's only one of 5 books you read that year. But my hope for you is a book a month, is a great goal. And like I said, the books can be whatever you want them to be. Books you've read before, books you've heard from others that are wonderful, nonfiction, fiction, poetry. It doesn't really matter. Just read. So how I go about it is I tend to alternate between fiction and nonfiction, sometimes reading them simultaneously. But I do find that if I have a fictional book going, then the next book I want is a nonfiction. And that can be like a biography. I even put poetry sometimes in those categories. Certainly essay collections are nonfiction to me. So you see on my list, there's like David Sedaris, and there's an Ayurvedic book, and there's a book on no drama discipline, which I probably should have read when my boys were 7 and 8 and not 16 and 14. But in any case, the point is that you're not just focusing on one genre or just focusing on another. And I would encourage you out there who really read primarily in the mystery genre or primarily in the fantasy genre to challenge yourself to maybe alternate between genres. So thinking about, if you're a fantasy reader, fantasy, then nonfiction, then back to fantasy, then literary fiction, then back to fantasy, so that you're always going back to your home base, your comfort zone, but at the same time, you're trying out other things and seeing if you like them, which I think is a great way to expand and diversify the voices that you're reading as well. I also read in 3 modes. I always have a hard book, tangible book that I'm reading. I have a Nook, the Barnes and Noble Nook, and I also listen to a lot of audiobooks when I run and when I'm walking the dog. Those are also ways that I can read a lot of books over the course of the year. I do find that with audiobooks, it's really important to have a great narrator. And if you don't like the narration, turn it off, get it in a hardcover, and move on with your life. And you'll know pretty quickly if you're going to be able to listen to that person for 12 hours or that cast of people for 13 hours, and if you're not. I'm currently listening to Let the Great World Spin by Colin McCann. And so far, the readers, there's more than one reader because there's more than one narrator, have all been great. Another suggestion I have is to have a book journal, whether it's just a plain spiral notebook, or I have two here that I finished this one this year, which is Bibliophile. You've probably seen these, like this illustrator all over Barnes and Noble or any of your indie bookstores. They have mugs and all kinds of things with the spine covers, these beautiful spine covers. And what I like about this one in particular is they have lots of book lists included in it within the illustrations. So I found myself like looking at these covers and then checking off the ones that I had read before and then circling ones I hadn't read. So these are a lot of classics, and having been a teacher for as long as I have been, I've read most of those, but there were a lot of new books, and especially books when my kids were really little. They were born in 2009 and 2011 that I missed totally because I wasn't reading as much at that time. And so I went and did a lot of backlist reading, and that comes from out of these kinds of journals where I just find this like cool list and I go from there. This one is the book journal from Anne Bogle. She's famous for her podcast, What Should I Read Next? I'm sure many of you who are readers have listened to that podcast. It's a great podcast. If you haven't, she basically interviews a person. She asks them 3 books they love, 1 book they didn't, and she makes recommendations about what they should read next, which is great. And I have applied to be on it. I haven't gotten there yet. We'll see. Maybe I'll apply again this year and see what happens. But in any case, this is a one that someone had gifted me. It's a great little book journal, and they definitely have spaces for you to fill out, what you liked about it, who you would recommend it to, memorable quotes, all the things. And it's a great way to solidify in your mind a book's plot summary and also who you might recommend it to, so that when you have lunch with that person, you can say, oh, you know what? I thought of you the other day, and I think you'd really like this book. And it just helps me remember, because I read a lot and sometimes it's hard to remember characters' names or settings after a while. And especially if you do a deep dive in an author like Ann Patchett, for example, I've read many of her books this year. Elizabeth Strout, I've read many of her books this year, and it's hard to remember which characters appeared in which books. And so having a little notebook like this helps me. And it's something that I have done my whole life. There are book lists all over my old journals and things like that, but I don't know if I really was as dedicated to keeping a journal as I have been in the last few years. So I just also want to say a couple of notables, which you'll see on my book list that are starred, but absolutely The Mothers by Brit Bennett was one of my favorite books of the year. Rules of Civility by Amor Towles was another one of my favorite books of the year. And I find myself really gravitating to this multiple narrator, and also, of course, the unreliable narrator is always one of my favorite ways of viewing a story. But what I loved about The Mothers was the idea of this Greek chorus of church women who kind of alternate the chapters in that book. And what I loved about The Rules of Civility was the opening of the story and how you're being told the entire thing in a flashback, but yet it's still so surprising. And it still has that element of the American dream and the Gatsby-esque qualities of the 20s and 30s and 40s, and spans a great length of time, but it is just a beautifully written book that I enjoyed thoroughly and have given out as a gift this year multiple times. So I just want you to be thinking about your top reads. I want you to be reading more. I want you to enjoy what you're reading. Don't be afraid to not finish a book. Don't be afraid. Life's too short, and there's so many books. And I am building my 2026 reading list as we speak. I have a lot of poetry that I want to read, and I have not found myself reading collected poetry as an entire entity this year. And so that's something that I have a goal for in 2026. I'd be really curious what your reading goals are. And of course, always want to know what you're reading. And we will talk to you soon. And for those of you who are here because of Let Go and Begin, our next workshop is on the 22nd, and we hope to see you there. Cheers.